Welcome to Motorbike Mondays, episode 14. This is Evan from Racetech Electric.
Brady from Seaweed and Gravel.
And Jared from Seaweed and Gravel.
Tonight we are continuing our series on carburetors. Last week was how carbs work, and tonight we are talking about carb tuning.
Yes.
Brady made some comprehensive notes.
Word of the day.
That we're going to refer to.
Comprehensive.
I thought it was funny he said comprehensive. I mean, it's the right word for it. It's just, I don't know why I keep saying that.
I had actually spent quite a great deal of time writing these notes, and I was in a rush leaving the house today. I probably spent a good 3 hours kind of going through, doing some extra research to make sure I am not forgetting anything, and ran out the door and completely forgot to print it and bring it along with me, and was yet to make it back to I know I was going to make it back to the house today, so I 15 minutes prior to us recording, I tried to type it all out again, and it went much quicker than expected.
Was the old or the original set of notes more comprehensive than this one?
I had a few things, but I guaranteed missed or forgot to put in a lot of things as well.
That's all right. These are pretty good. This is by far the most prepared.
Yeah.
That we've been.
Yeah. Well, I
impressive.
figured, we would have to be on this one because I'm sure a lot of you have been looking forward to this one, or have at the very least just been interested in this. It is quite a hot topic, as
Why was that? Was that funny?
No, it wasn't.
You looked at me like I should have been prepared to start laughing.
It's maybe one of my trigger words. No, it is
a hot topic.
I at least get a lot of questions on people asking how to tune carbs. If you look at any forum, there's probably at least 50 threads of people asking questions like, "Oh, I just changed the pods. Like, what do I jet to?" and stuff like that. So this is not going to be specific to any bike whatsoever. Carb tuning, for the most part, doesn't have to be. It's only when you get down to jet sizes and stuff like that does it apply to that bike specifically. So we're going to go through the process, some things to look for as far as like how the condition of your air-to-fuel mixture is, rich conditions, lean conditions, and go through some of the symptoms that you can find with those, and go through and how to adjust and how to fine-tune. And we're going to try to get very in-depth with this one for you guys.
Yeah, this will be useful on just about anything. But if you haven't listened to the last show, I would listen to that first, so you're familiar with all the different pieces and what they do.
Yeah, if you can bear through that one.
We were
kind of all over the place.
That was not our best material by far, but
yeah, hopefully, if you're unsure on some things, maybe some of the stuff will clear up. We'll clear them up for you, because we're gonna pretty much go in depth of what all those things do. Not necessarily what they do, but how to adjust them. So,
yeah. Well, first,
shall we start it off with how about Jared? What's in your shop today, Jared?
What's in the shop?
Thanks, Evan.
Somebody had to do
right
it
now. A Honda CB550 is still in the shop.
I think it's safe to assume that there is always a CB550 in
it's
your
the
shop.
same
Yeah.
one. It's the same one that I built for the show and for the client. Basically, as it was getting tuned and everything, we realized that it's a 1978 CB550, and as I was tuning, we realized that it had pre-76 carbs on it, and I found this out because there's no way to sync the carburetors. So basically, up to 77 or up to 76, the vacuum ports to sync the carbs are on the intake manifold. And from 77 to 78, they're on the actual carburetor. The carburetor's changed in those years. So I couldn't sync the carbs. So I had another rack of carbs that were the 77 that were correct. Put those on.
Wait, because the intake manifolds didn't have the port and the carbs didn't have the port?
So there was no way to sync the carbs.
Got it.
Which is a part of carb tuning.
It is.
But yeah, so put the right carb rack on so I could tune the carbs, and then I was having problems with one of them, and then some other stuff, and some weird stuff happened to it. And then today I was syncing the carbs, and then the idle kept fluctuating, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I realized that there's a huge vacuum leak on the manifold, on the manifold side of the engine. So where the heads and the manifold meet, there's vacuum leaks everywhere.
What was causing it?
Air.
The intake manifolds that bolt onto the heads.
Do they have their own O-ring inside them?
Yeah, so those O-rings are probably dried out.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't pulled it off yet.
Got it.
But had I known this earlier, I probably would have just swapped intake manifolds instead of swapping carbs and then been done with it. But I'm not, so that's what's going on.
I probably would have.
Not too happy about it.
Yeah.
Is it still charging the battery fine?
Yeah, it's charging. Everything else is working fine. But, yeah. What about you, Brady?
I have the XS750.
Brady's currently on a vape-tastic voyage right now. He'll be right
I
with
have
you.
the XS750 still in the shop. It is now getting my full attention, which has been very nice. I can't remember the last time I worked on one bike. So I finished up a while back. I finished with the seat and shaping it with the help with Jared, as I only had one hand at the moment, or not this moment, but at that moment. And it needed a little body work, so I smoothed that out and made a seat pan to get upholstered, and just kind of sorting that. And that is about one of the last things that needs to be done. I need to make a little underbelly under the seat to mount the battery and a few other things. But aside from that, I'm just about ready for paint. Still need to finish up the pipes. I ended up having to order some U-bends because our bender wouldn't. We don't have the die for that size tubing, and didn't want to buy one quite yet.
Yeah, those are expensive, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, it will.
They're like $200.
Yeah.
The bender is almost as expensive, or the die is almost as expensive as the bender.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So probably next build, I'll write that into the build, and we'll get at least some dies for bending exhaust tubing. And so I just had to order a couple U-bends and get that sorted. And yeah, it'll probably be in Evan's shop shortly after paint to do electrical on it if he is willing.
I would love to see a running XS750.
That's right.
So I am more than willing.
Yeah,
That'd
so I think that's what I got in there. I don't think anything else. Oh, I do have that 86 Gixxer 750.
Oh, what happened with the eBay sale?
Oh, well, so it turns out I'm not going to hold on to the bike. So I threw it up on eBay and
didn't hit reserve?
No, it did. But the winning bidder,
backed out.
He said, "Oh, I bid on this bike by mistake. I tried to message you, which I received no messages."
Welcome to eBay.
So,
God, that happens almost every time I sell a bike on eBay.
Yeah. So I just don't want to really.
What did it close at?
It wasn't as much as I expected, but I mean, it was like at 17.
The reserve. What'd you have? 15 or something?
I had it at 16.
16. Okay.
So I mean,
I thought it would go for more than that.
Yeah, I did too, but I mean, it's not in like the greatest shape. It runs perfect, or not perfect, but it runs great. Some of the, I mean, there's a dent in the tank, and the belly fairing or plastic and the side plastics are modified, meaning cut. But for the most part, I mean, it's all original, still there, and it's guaranteed going to be one of the next kind of like sought after kind of collector bikes.
Oh yeah, they already are. But with those, it definitely hurts it not having complete fairings.
Yeah,
but
yeah, definitely. Which they're easily sourceable. But
do you have it on Craigslist too?
I just put it on Craigslist this morning, and I've already gotten a few.
I think you could
few hits from it, so I'm just going to go that route. I'd much rather talk to someone in person, anyways. So if you're looking for an '86 GSXR 750,
send me some pictures and I'll put it on the site.
Yeah, I'll do that. So that's what's in the shop.
Well, there's one less bike in my shop.
Yes,
as of tonight.
Two less bikes.
Two.
The final conclusion.
The BMW R90 is finally gone. It's been picked up and rode home, and must have made it home because I didn't hear from him. So that's awesome. So that whole drama is finally done, which is excellent. That bike was a long project and a big mess. So it's glad to have it finished and out of here. And then I sold the 71 Honda CL350 Scrambler that I had picked up. I sold that this weekend, so that is sitting in the back of my truck. I got to go drop it off for the guy tonight, and that's awesome. Then still need to get the Interceptor sold, but
the Interceptor.
Interceptor.
It's pretty much what you can learn from this already is if you're looking for a bike, we have many to choose from.
Just let us know what you need. We might have one already.
Jared, you got any bike for sale right now?
Yeah, I got a KC750
That's
twin.
right. There's a KC750
I haven't really been pushing
twin.
that, but it is for sale.
Yeah. I kind of forgot about that.
I did too.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to end up keeping that little RS100 for Whitney to ride. We're going to sell her Virago.
Yeah, that is an upgrade from that Virago.
I think it's a cool little bike. I like those Navis I got, or not really Navis, but those
they're like
those
enduro. They're not enduro, but like trail.
The 241.
What are they? The SR241.
Yeah,
those
like
are the
real
same,
blocky tread.
Those are the same tires I put on the 550.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I saw. Yeah, that's right. That's where I saw them. Yeah, I like how they look. It's going to be really cool. Although I was just mocking it up, and I'm wondering they may not fit. They're a little bigger, especially the front tires bigger.
Are they taller or wider?
Both.
No, they go on really easily.
Really?
Yeah, they slide.
Well, I'm worried about it hitting the front fender, though. Is what it looked. I don't know for sure.
You won't have clearance with the front fender.
But now that we're going to keep the bike, I'm going to have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. No, just take it off. She's not going to be riding it in the rain.
No.
So
is she really going to ever ride it?
But I'm going to do a bunch of stuff. This is going to... Yeah, I will be riding this. I'm actually...
Evan is one of those gift givers that gives something that he really wants.
Yes, so that's exactly right. So for Christmas, you guys are getting iPods and laptops.
Yeah. But you have to use them at your. We have to use
them
at your house.
They're gonna be in my office
at Fort Awesome.
Well, I wouldn't feel. I would gladly go drive down to your house if you got me a Xbox One.
Come on down and play. It's plugged in with my 42-inch big screen, ready to jam.
Well, the babe's gone this weekend out of town, so I might just.
Oh, I'm gonna be out of town this weekend. I'm going to Santa Barbara. So, man, and. You need to get an Xbox for Titanfall, by the way. Have you heard about that?
Oh, I have, yeah.
I got in on the beta test, so because it comes out in like a week or something. But they had a beta test online on Xbox, so you could play it. It was only for like 4 or 5 days. It was epic. It is the best game ever. It was so crazy because you play in your robot, like your big robot tank thing. Plus, you can jump out of it and fight on foot. So, like, the battle is just nuts because you got the pilot. Everybody's a pilot, and you're running around like Call of Duty style, like gunfights. And then the timer counts down, and you can drop your Titan. And so then this robot comes dropping out of the sky. You jump off of a building, and then the robot reaches out its hand, grabs you in the air, shoves you in the cockpit, and then you go around launching missiles and stuff. And then you get blown up, eject, and you go fight on foot again. It is insane.
It
is probably the best like shooter game I've ever played.
That is quite comprehensive.
It's very comprehensive. Anyways, I really like it. It's a cool game. So, yeah, I don't know what else I was talking about. Well, anyways, the RS 100.
We all lost track.
I'm stoked because now we're going to keep it, and I'm going to get to play with it all the time. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. It'll be a cool bike to keep because I'll keep it at home in the garage, and I'll just have a cool little bike to cruise around the house or in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So that's cool, and that's about it. Nothing new here.
Shop.
So yeah, let's talk about tuning carburetor.
All right, so carb tuning. We'll start it off with going through some possible reasons why you are need to tune your carbs, or for the most part, which most people are probably interested in this is rejetting. There's often a lot of questions, like I mentioned, about rejetting. So some of the reasons why you would choose to do so is main one would be modified, if you're running a modified intake or exhaust, so a freer flowing intake, say pod filters, foam filters, or even just like a K&N filter that's more free flowing than stock, holes drilled in the airbox, any modification to the intake are likely to require rejetting. And an exhaust, free flowing, say just a muffler swap, anywhere from that to running just straight open pipes. And another reason would be, say, even as slight as an overbore on the cylinder. Say the cylinder walls were just worn out, scuffed, scarred. So you would overbore the piston or the cylinder walls to put a new piston, a larger piston in with larger rings. And that you don't necessarily, I wouldn't presume you have to rejet necessarily, but maybe do some modifications to, which we'll get into, is say the mixture screw. Or if you're doing, say, the extreme to that would be an actual big bore. So you're actually substantially boring out the cylinder walls. So say you have a 750, you're boring it out with the 836 kit, I believe.
836.
Or so if you're changing the bore, or if you're just changing the stroke. Stroke is the length of the piston movement. So say you stroke it so it goes down farther, you're changing the amount you're changing the compression ratio. Essentially, anything that changes compression ratio, you're going to have to do some tuning, minor or complete overhaul. Same thing with some head work. You have some head work that allows you more free flow, flowing heads, bigger valves. So anything to do with performance based, or just allowing the motor to breathe a little bit more, you're going to need to go through the carbs and get them tuned to your application. So with that said, we're just going to start off with kind of going through the list of conditions, of rich conditions and lean conditions. So, Jared, do you want to start off with some rich conditions?
Well, some rich conditions, backfiring when you're accelerating. Your spark plugs will be like black. That's like super rich, or like dark brown. Your engine noise might be like dull or muted, might be as like crisp and clean as it should be. It might kind of sound bogged a little bit. When you put the choke on, it obviously gets worse because
you're increasing the amount of fuel in the mixture when the choke is on.
Right. Especially if it's an enricher.
Exactly.
When the engine gets hot, it gets worse. when you smell like a lot of fuel, that's a good indicator of rich mixture, rich condition.
Yeah, and when the reason that it gets worse when the motor is hot is simply because when it's cool, when air is cool, is denser, and so there's more air parts in the mixture, and when it warms up, the air is much not as dense, so that will thinner. Thank you. So that will change your mixture level.
RPM rise? Yeah?
Not necessarily. No, it does quite the opposite, actually.
Goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and this is more so at, like, say, idle. You'll have a lower idle just because it's kind of stumbling a little bit.
When it's too rich?
Yeah.
Because it's, like, loading down the motor?
And did you go through, like, you'll have, like, a rich or strong fuel smell or odor?
Yeah, I talked about that. You would, when I'm sorry, I'm half here right now. When you're running rich, there's a smell, and it's just like super strong, and just it smells like gasoline, I guess.
Yeah,
not really like gasoline, but it doesn't smell. It just smells rich.
It doesn't smell like.
Are you getting like? Is it because there's too much gas? You're getting unburned gas.
Yeah, it's unburned. It's unburned mixture exiting the exhaust, and that's another reason why when you're accelerating, you're hard on the throttle. That's where those backfires are coming from, because it's actually igniting
extra gas.
Unburned mixture inside of the exhaust pipes, causing that backfire. Which backfire, if we're going to get technical, at least backfires are when it's sneezing out of the intake, and when it pops out of the exhaust. Those are called afterfires. But it's commonly known as backfires, and so we'll stick to that. But a little fun thing for you.
After fire?
After fire.
Huh. Good to know.
Yeah, and on severely rich conditions, you'll have almost a smoke or a smoke coming out of the exhaust as well. And if you are running rich, doesn't necessarily all of these are going to apply. You could have, and doesn't mean that if you're getting one or two of these symptoms, that you are running rich. So, I mean, there are a few other things that could make some of these symptoms apply, and it could not be dealt with, or could not just be rich conditions. Another thing that Evan just reminded me.
If you notice that the bike runs better with the air box or the air filter off, that could indicate a rich condition, because you're leaning it out more by removing the air box. So if that corrects the mixture problem, then when everything's set up the way it's supposed to with the air box and the filter installed, the mixture's too rich.
Yeah. And so that about covers it. I'm sure there's definitely possibly some more conditions with rich conditions. But those are pretty much the common ones and the ones that you'll most likely see. So lean conditions, you'll notice some backfiring or afterfiring when deaccelerating. So when you're off the throttle, you'll hear that popping. And
that's what I remember from running into that with dirt bikes a lot. When you change, especially when you put an aftermarket exhaust and you don't up the pilot jet size, you'll notice crazy popping. Like when you chop the throttle coming to a stop, you'll notice it really, really pop loud.
Oh, and another thing too, if you are running, say, a free-flowing exhaust, or not necessarily free-flowing, but if you're running, say, straight exhaust, you're gonna get backfiring and popping pretty much no matter what your mixture conditions are. It could be running absolutely perfect. You're still going to get some backfiring. So if you are running straight exhaust and you're backfiring on acceleration and on deceleration. These don't necessarily apply to you. So another lean condition, your motor will be running very hot. Possibly you're more likely to overheat in a lean condition, especially if it's very lean. If you can get it to start.
Yeah, I've even seen bikes. This one, what was it? It was a Yamaha's a WR426. That's what always sticks in my head. That motor was always extremely lean by default, and I remember those bikes had with the stock jets, you would even have the head pipe get red hot sometimes when they're running. Because I remember that, and I put exhaust on and screwed around with it, and it took forever to jet correctly. But that always sticks in my mind. I remember that thing getting like cherry red. It was crazy to the point where like I was going to replace it anyway. So I remember having it bright red, and I poked it with a nail or something, and I could actually like deform the head pipe. Yeah, it was crazy,
man.
So yeah, that was definitely running hot.
Yeah, and if you're not really sure on that kind of reminded me in another place to check if to kind of see if you are running too hot. Say you have a chrome exhaust, or even just it doesn't necessarily have to be chrome, but if you notice like some bluing in the pipe. That is not supposed to, for it to get to that amount of temperature to actually blue the pipe. In most cases, that could be a sign of running a bit lean. So another way to check to see if you are even running lean conditions is if the motor improves when the choke is on. When you are leaning out the mixture and it runs better, then that is a sign of a lean condition.
Too much air, basically.
Yeah. And if the plug reading is... we'll go a quick run through of like plug readings, not spend too much time. It's kind of a visual thing. But if they're anywhere from white or light gray to... very light brown is an indication of lean condition, and an overall lack of power is another one. So since we mentioned it,
let's talk about
that.
Plug reading, their plug chart, you can find these pretty much anywhere. If you do a quick
all
look
those
at it.
service manuals, like the Haynes manual has, and there's another brand,
Climber.
Yeah, they always have a color chart showing the plugs. You know what I'm talking about? You ever seen them there? And they show like examples of different colors of plugs and then what that would mean. But basically the darker... Well, let's talk... Okay, explain how to do it first, and then we'll explain what it means.
Yeah, so we might as well get into it because we are going to be using... When we go through the different... To test out your different jet sizes that you have installed into your carb to rejet. This is pretty much the process you're going to go through, say, not on a dyno. Obviously, with the dyno, you don't have to be doing this, and you'll get... It's a much easier way, but also to tune your carbs, but also a much more pricey way. And you don't really learn too much because the techs do it for you. Kind of referring back to the... when we explained all the different throttle positions and...
check out the page from the show last week because that chart's on there.
Yeah, and we'll post another one in this
I can put it in there
podcast
again.
As well. So in the different throttle positions, that's where it correlates with what jets and what system, say the needle system, pilot system, main jet, where those apply to that throttle position. So to test out your jets, you will go, say, on the open road, somewhere that you can probably cause a little bit of ruckus for the temporary time. And
you don't want to do this in traffic.
Yeah, not necessarily in traffic. If there's a large enough parking lot that's free, I fortunately used to live right next to one, so I used to do that. there.
What's important is somewhere that you can pull over safely and quickly without having to like be getting hit by cars and stuff.
Yeah. So what you will be doing is, say I want to test out the main jet that I just swapped in. Aside from possibly some of these rich conditions that we went through, these are more of the the dramatic signs of say over rich, like extremely rich or extremely lean. These will be more predominant, but if it's just kind of off a bit, a plug reading can give you a more accurate identification of what your mixture is. So say I'm going to test my main jet, and so I'll go out and be in that position, so pretty much 3/4 to wide open or full throttle. Hold that for at least 5 seconds and cut the engine at that point and pull the plug and then take a reading on the plug. And what you're looking at is on the little ceramic, what's that called, Evan? Insulator. The insulator. And that's where it's usually white. And you're checking the coloration on that. What you want is like a golden brown, and that's prime mixture color. On really lean conditions, you can see like white around like all the inside of the threadings and stuff like that, and on the electro rod. Is that it?
Electrode.
Electrode.
Well, make sure that you look at a new plug first, so you know exactly what it looks like to begin with.
And it helps too if your plugs are new or clean when you start this process.
Yeah,
as well.
you don't want to do it with an old plug because just with age, the white insulator will get dirty and blackened.
Yeah.
So you want to start with a clean one, ideally, so you know this will be an accurate reading because you can note whatever changes.
Yeah,
happen.
Definitely. So pretty much you want the rest, which we're going to go into in a moment, but you want your bike to be every other system on the bike as far as the functionality with the motor and how it runs to be at its very best. Because if a little thing is off, it will affect your tune. So this is essentially your last step when you're getting a bike on ready and on the road. So we'll see if we can find something or a link to a plug color diagram and kind of shows you all the different colors and signs. It even goes down to, say, if you're burning oil, what that looks like on your plug. So I don't usually base my tunes off of plug readings. The modern fuels these days, you can't really. I don't feel you can get a very accurate reading, and I just don't trust it completely.
But it's a good base.
It's a good base, yeah, and it's good. It's good kind of common knowledge to have because it can apply to you.
I think where it really helps is when it ends up being on one of the extremes.
Yeah.
When it's in the middle, because I've done this a couple times, and to be honest, I've never really had a whole lot of success with it.
Me neither.
I've never seen one be far enough one way or the other that I could make a really strong conclusion.
Yeah.
Usually I look at it and I'm kind of like, crap, what is this?
Yeah.
Well, and with plug chops too, you got to go and you got to bring your 18 millimeter, whatever size socket you need, and the socket wrench, and like put it in a backpack or something, and then get under the throttle, and then kill the engine. And on our bikes, like we don't run kill switches, so you gotta like with your hand, with your throttle still open, kill the engine. Which for me, my keys are usually on the right side of the bike.
Yeah.
So I got to cross over and do that.
That makes sense now.
But then got to go back and pull the clutch so that I don't just freaking, and it's kind of sketchy. But
here's one thing I wondered. So, I mean, I get that you want to chop it at the throttle position you're trying to test, but in the split second that it would take for you to roll off the throttle and then reach over,
that's
is
why
that enough to make a difference that it's not going to be accurate?
Well, you're supposed to.
It's not going to make a difference where it's going to dramatically offset, but it's not going to be as accurate, as if you did cut it at that point.
Yeah.
But if you just ran it at the constant throttle position that you're trying to check for like let's say a quarter of a mile or something. I mean,
that'd be well
in the amount of time of a change that it.
Well, you also got to factor in the time it takes you to stop and decelerate. Too,
well, another thing too is this doesn't necessarily. You can do this test in any gear at any speed. It doesn't apply to what gear you're in or at the speed that you're going. You could be, say, going 15, pop it into fourth gear, and just jump on the throttle.
Okay, but then why can't you just do this in neutral?
I think it has to be under load.
Well, if you do it in neutral, you want it under load, because that's when that's and at the same time you don't want to freaking blast full throttle for 5 seconds on
an engine that requires air cooled
load.
I guess. Yeah, I guess if it's not, so it's not really.
If you want to find valve float, then that's an easy way to do it. But.
It's not just throttle position; it's the engine working,
when it's working
at that throttle position. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So, it's most importantly, I usually base it off of feel. If it feels like. And there are other tests to do this as well. I didn't really get into those because I've never really done them that way. I would say sometimes like lean conditions and rich conditions can feel the same, and so checking your plug can give you kind of head you in the right direction. If I'm running rich. If it is kind of on the extreme sides or even somewhat like you can pretty easily tell. It's easier to identify if it is running rich, because it does soot up.
That's for sure.
The plug much more than a lean condition. But a lot of this is going to be by feel, and when you hit your sweet spot, you're going to know. It's more so when you're getting down to like you want that plug reading or that that perfect mix air to fuel ratio. That's involved a lot more high tech equipment, dyno running kind of stuff like that, to where it actually has readings of all those numbers, but. This isn't. I wouldn't focus on like reaching that perfect mixture. More so like when it feels good, it is good. So just a lot of butt dyno time for the most part. And so that's the process you're going to be doing for a lot of these applications as far as the different systems that we're going to be getting into. So now that we kind of hopefully covered how you're going to test your tune. And your jetting, we'll get into the actual jetting process and tuning process. So there's a few steps you want to prep before you actually get into it. So
because you don't want to be thinking you're tuning the carbs when you might have another issue going on. It could totally throw off your results. But it's really the prep is really making sure that every other part of the motor is set properly and is working correctly, so you don't have any. You're basically trying to eliminate variables. If you're trying to tune the carbs, you don't want to have any issues with another system,
like vacuum leaks.
Yes, like vacuum leaks.
You want to make when you're tuning your carbs, that's like the last check off. Like after you've done your valves, after you've adjusted your cam chain, after you've adjusted. Made sure you don't have vacuum leaks after you've set your timing.
Cam chain, that's a good one. Yeah, so some of them, you definitely want to make sure that your timing is set perfectly, so that's not anything you have to worry about. We've talked about that before, but you can easily look up the process for setting the timing on your bike. You want to make sure your valves are recently adjusted and you know that they are all set correctly. Again, we've talked about that before, and you can look up that process. And then you also want to make sure that the carbs are synced. So you don't want to be chasing an out-of-sync carb where they're not opening the same amount.
And when you're syncing the carbs, that's kind of I would because when you're rejetting, most of the time you're going to have the carbs off of the bike, so you can either say you don't have a synchronizer for carburetors, you can do a bench sync, which I don't know if we're going to have much time to go through that right now.
Are you talking about setting the butterflies?
Setting the butterflies, say like on the throttle valve on the C, or at least the butterfly throttle valve style on the CV carb, or the actual slide where height closes.
You can set them to where they visually look pretty close.
Really, if you have a set of calipers, it's really not too difficult.
Or just I use sometimes
feeler gauges.
Oh, that would work.
Yeah, feeler gauges, or I've used a very small drill bit.
That would work.
So you just essentially what syncing carburetors is making sure they all are flowing the same amount of vacuum. They're flowing. So like say the butterflies, the throttle valve, they're all each carburetor. If you have more than one carburetor, are set at the same. So that's like your base. When nothing is touched on the bike, it's set all at the same level, and it's pulling in the same amount of vacuum.
So that your cylinders...
A bench sync lets you basically make those adjustments by physically measuring how much
it's
they're
like a
opening.
static sync.
Yeah,
and getting close.
Right, and that may not necessarily be perfect for running conditions, but that will get you pretty damn close.
And so...
Unless you're really good at it.
So you can do that.
I've done it before and completely screwed it up. You definitely need to make sure that you get the correct measurement for that. And then make sure it's for your exact carburetor, not just that bike, because that bike may have had different carbs on it for different years. I've made that mistake before, and then synced them completely wrong and had a nightmare.
So I don't think we're going to go too much into carb syncing. We might that might even be another topic we get into if you'd wish.
But it's fresh on the mind.
Oh no, that paper picked you up real well.
We're still got a lot of
Are you
stuff.
talking to your vape stick?
We still got a lot of stuff to go through, and one bit of information at a time. I feel is the best way to go about. So bench sync your carbs. Or go through and after you make your adjustments that we're going to go through right now, sync your carbs once more time when you actually are going in and doing the fine-tuning that we're going to get into in a second. So the very first thing you're going to adjust, which is a very important one. We've spoken about it before, was your float system. And you want to make sure that your float is adjusted at the right height, so it allows the right amount of fuel into the bowl, and it cuts off when the right amount of fuel is in the bowl. So there's we're just gonna go through the parts that's in the float system. This one is... I actually found out the term for this one today. The tang. And what that is...
It's a kicking glass.
What that is the actual adjustment tab that rests against the float needle. And if you have a carburetor setup that has a fixed adjustment, whether it's usually the plastic ones, where it's completely fixed, you can go wash the dishes at this point while you're listening to this, because you don't need to hear it. And so there's the tang.
Well, isn't there still... So, because I've seen carbs that have the plastic, the whole assembly is like one piece. Is there really no adjustment at all on those?
Some of them have
nothing.
Some of them do, but most of them don't. I
haven't run across any of the...
I've seen plastic floats that have adjustments on them.
Yes, because
the only part that's plastic is the float.
Yeah, right.
So you got to make sure. He's talking about...
No, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's talking about the whole thing is just a fixed assembly.
Right. And I can't think of any adjustment on those, but...
Yeah. So there's the float, and there is the float needle. That is the little tapered guy we've explained before. And then there's the float seat. With the seat is where the needle rest in and shuts off the fuel inlet. If you haven't checked before when you've gone through carb cleaning or doing anything, one thing I didn't mention is you want to make sure your carbs are completely clean before you start getting into this. So add that to your prep list. Make sure your valve is seated, meaning when it is closed, it's not letting any fuel in. To adjust this, there are many ways to do this, but
I would really refer to the service manual for the bike because that will tell you on the exact style of carb you have how to adjust this and exactly what the adjustment is.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you need to get is the exact adjustment.
Right.
And they'll give it to you in, like, if it's these Japanese bikes. Well, they'll give it to you in thousandths and in millimeters
it's usually
as well.
In both,
yeah. Well, and also if you can't find it specifically for your bike, try looking up for specifically to that carburetor.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what bike it is. Ultimately, it's the carburetor that.
No, I've seen them be different before. Same carbs, different bikes. They'll have a different measurement per bike.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because some might
have bigger jets or something.
Yeah, they might need to hold
faster.
more fuel in the float bowl than the other. Yeah, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Regardless, look it up for the exact year, make, model you're dealing with.
But in another case, say that you cannot find that measurement. This would not be. I would definitely spend some time looking for that number before you go to this route. I'll explain to how to get that measurement what they're asking for first. So with the carbs, with the carburetor upside down, so the float bowl,
the needle is closed.
Yeah, so it's closed, and the float is right side up. The bottom of the float, when you flip it upside down, we're calling that the top of it. So the very highest point of the float, you are going to take that measurement to the gasket surface on the carburetor body. And that's the number that you're going to be referring to in most cases. If you can't find that number, just through doing a lot of carbs and just kind of putting it together is that number usually indicates when the float is parallel with the gasket surface. I've
seen them say in a service manual say to take the measurement holding the carb roughly sideways. So what you're looking for is the float to be totally vertical, and they give you a measurement with the valve open.
Yeah, I've seen that too. But after you measure it, it is completely horizontal or parallel to the gasket surface.
When it's set correctly, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've also seen it where they give you a measurement at where the tang should be bent from the rest of the float body.
Yes, I've seen
float
that too.
Arm, and so you stick like a feeler gauge or something in there to the right. And that's how, and then you bend the tang to fit that feeler gauge.
Wait, so you're saying
that's not accurate at all because
if the arms are bent, then yeah,
exactly.
But I've seen that before in manuals.
Are you saying that the measurement, the number what you're measuring is from the float bowl body, the gasket surface, basically, to the top of the float?
Yeah,
with it closed.
Yeah.
And that's the number that they would provide you with in the manual.
That's what I've seen. I can't
think of ever seeing. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just have never seen it that way.
Wait, so if carbs are upside down,
right? So then the float is all the way closed, resting on the needle,
right?
And then you're measuring from the body of the carburetor with the float bowl removed, obviously the gasket surface, basically, if the float bowl was on it, from there to the top of the float.
Yeah.
I've just never seen it done that way, but
the top of the float, which would be the bottom of the float.
But all it comes down to is if you know the spec that they have provided you with, that whatever measurement is supposed to be this number, then that's the way you want to measure it and compare it to that number.
You know what I've also seen on BS38s, the carbs that were on the KZ750, they're also on XS650s, is they didn't have a measurement for it, or the only measurement for that was you had to get this tool from Kawasaki and it replaced the drain plug, and you put a fuel line on the other end of the drain plug, and you filled the float bowl with fuel, and then held it back up, and you measured from the bottom of the carburetor bowl, from the bottom of the float bowl to the gasket surface, or where it would be, and you take that measurement, and if that's how they told you to set the float.
Wait, you filled it up from the drain?
You put the carbs on the bike, and you put gas in, and so the drain screw at the bottom of the float bowl. It comes out, and you put a new adapter on that.
And so you use like a clear tubing, and it shows you. It shows you the level of fuel.
In the ass.
Yeah, and that number with that or that reading, what you're trying to do, you're trying to get it to the to line up with that gasket surface or that
you're
line.
Adjusting how much fuel the float bowl holds, basically.
So that's why this one's very important. So say if that float is out of adjustment and it is bringing in too much fuel, you're going to get a richer condition in your mixture.
Right.
Because it's going to suck up more fuel than what it's set up to do. And same thing if you're running really low fuel level in the float bowl, you're going to get a leaner condition
because the float's going to be shutting off fuel supply too soon.
Yeah.
And then the other way, if you're letting in too much gas, you're going to get it overflowing as well.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, it's going to drain out of the
overflow spout.
Yeah, or the drain plug, not plug,
pipe.
But yeah. So that is adjustment on your float. Again, there with the multiple types of carburetors, refer back to a manual and make sure you're adjusting your float to the proper specs. And now we're going to jump into some of the jets. The two jets we're going to go through pretty much are the main jet and pilot jet. And for this, most jetting is a lot of trial and error. And there's actually a somewhat guide. We're gonna send a link your guys' way to.
I'm gonna post this in the. I'll put a link and give them credit for it. I'm gonna post the this kind of chart kind of thing that this guy made to show you, because this is really cool. It gives you basically a list of common modifications or parts, and then it lets you know basically what jet size or how many jet sizes to go up or down, and you can combine all of the changes that you've made and therefore jet changes you need to make and come up with a total number of sizes you need to move from the stock jetting, taking into account your modifications.
Yeah, it's really extremely helpful. I've used this a lot in the past, and it gives you a ballpark of where you need to be. Chances are you may have to to get the jetting right and accurate. You may have to go one step or higher, one step lower to what kind of you find off of this if you choose to go through this kind of formula, I would say. But it gets you in the ballpark. A lot of jetting, a lot of questions are asked is like, I did this, like, where do I start? So this is kind of a starting point for you that I've used, and it has saved so much time and frustration.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just not knowing where to go.
Because you usually
wasting money on so many damn jets.
You end up going onto a forum, trying to find a post with somebody that did the exact same modifications as you, and then see
and trying to find their jet
what
readings.
They did. And then they usually that was their first try, and
they're
it's
usually
not right.
wrong.
Yeah. and then they never went back and posted
one
what
time.
actually worked.
One time, when I was jetting the KZ, I freaking bought every jet size from like 125 to 155 or something like that.
Yeah.
And because I couldn't get it, no matter what I did, I couldn't get it right. And I was like, I had a drill kit and a jet drill kit, so I just kept stepping it up, and I could never get it right ever. And it turned out I finally got it, but I used every single jet in that kit.
The good thing, though, if you're going to keep messing with bikes, a lot of carburetors share the same jets within the brand and probably even across Mikuni and Kian probably shared some of the same sizes, right?
Well, they're
I know they do on dirt bikes, but
they're different drills. Like on a Kian jet, the jet number, say it's like a 130.
Yeah.
That diameter could be referencing something different than on a Mikuni jet.
There's no like general measuring.
It's not like 130 millimeters or something like that.
So like say you get like a OEM Keaton jet,
right?
And it's the same number, say, as like a Dynajet,
right?
Which I have words to say about Dynajet. I'm not going to speak. They go by a completely different rating system and so say a 120 jet size, for OEM Keaton, it can be a completely different size for a Dynajet that's a 120. So it's kind of another reason why I don't really care for them too much. But
don't they make like they make like kits, right? With like a whole
that's
set of
but that's like you take out all the stock jets and you put in their jets,
right?
And like you order it for that specific carb with what you've done.
See,
or there's stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3.
Not dirt bikes on GSXRs. I've had 2 carbureted GSXRs that I have put. I'm pretty sure they were Dynajet kits. Maybe not, but I think so. And I remember, we did that on my brother's Ninja too, his ZX9. I remember thinking every single time that like they were expensive, and the whole point of going with it was they were supposed to be like completely, it would solve all the problems, and we would be set up for the exhaust and the air filter we just put on, and they were never right. Every single time I ended up taking them to my buddy Mike's shop and having him dial them in because they were never correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my biggest peeves, I guess, about it is like jet kits in general is there is no possible way to generalize a single jet kit for some, say, modifications. They're stage 1, 2, or not a single, but stages. Like in 3 stages, you cannot
which would
generalize.
Be fine if they didn't sell it as the like solution for this, but they say, "Oh, cool, got aftermarket exhaust, put this stage 1 jet kit in. Got
every
a
exhaust
air
flows
filter,
differently.
Stage 2.
Every different intake
they're
flows
never
differently,
right.
and it's not gonna be right. So we'll definitely put a link on the website for this, and I believe it came from Motorcycle Carburetor or motorcyclecarbs.com. Chances are they'll probably have some pretty good information on that too, or at least carburetor information as well. But it's really, really straightforward, simple, and I've used this on many different bikes, and it's put me in the ballpark at least to get started, and on my jetting and fine-tuning those as well. So, and remember, one step. So say you'll hear like, one step up from, say, each step in the carb jet is 2.5. So say you have a 125 or 120, just to make the math easier, 120 main jet, and you need to up it 2 steps. That will be a 125 jet. So one step is 2.5 numerical units. Or units.
Really? I've never seen like a 122.5 jet.
Yeah, I've seen them all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess I don't very often jet carburetors. But,
so keep that in mind, reference, so you don't say, I need 2 sizes up from a 120 and get a 122, and then you're way off and like, what the hell? And write us a nasty email. That's what I recommend. It's done me well in the past to get me in the ballpark, like I said, when you are trying to figure out what jet sizes to start with. And as far as ordering jets, I always go to jetsrs.com. There hasn't been a set of carburetors that they don't have jets for. Very quick delivery time. Super simple. Their website's very laid out, very simple, and very user friendly. And I can't recommend them enough. Moving on now, needle position is another one where I haven't really found like a formula for it. If I've done a kind of extensive intake and exhaust modification, maybe with some port job as well or something, I'll adjust the needle like 1 to 2 clips up. I've never likely you're not going to have to lean out some of these things from stock if you modified. So with that, it's kind of, I think, like a butt dyno. You're just going to have to feel it out, probably do a lot of riding in the half throttle range.
The needle, changing the clip on the needle will change, richen or lean it across the entire range that the needle's in play, because you're actually changing where the taper sits.
Yeah.
Where the needle sits in the main.
And allowing
so it's, like it's really more of a feel thing. I think whenever I've done it, like changing the taper on the needle changing the clip position will not make, like I don't see that ever solving, like say you've got like the backfire problem because it's lean or something. It's not going to solve something like that, but it might smooth out a dead spot or something.
Exactly. It smooths out transitions, and it does. There is a little bit of an area where it's the needle's time to shine, where this is all me, boys. I got this. And that throttle position, so it is important, but most of the time, it helps in transfer a lot.
When it comes through the party chamber or
the Venturi, party room. I've never had to adjust. I don't fine tune. I don't build race bikes or anything, so I don't need to like fine tune the taper and of the needle and stuff like that. When you get into that, that's more kind of you're getting everything out of that motor and that tune.
No, but I've seen online. I've done this on a few. Again, most of my carb experiences with dirt bikes, and I have changed the needle on a dirt bike carb before to a needle from a different model or brand of carburetor, just because I found it on a forum or something, and somebody said, "Hey, this made a difference," and the needle fits, but the taper's totally different, and it completely changed the way the bike behaved. So, like, I've seen it make a difference before, but I'm not really smart enough to explain why or figure out what swap to do on my own.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of when it gets into needle taper and stuff. My knowledge of that doesn't really exist too much. So I just based on my experience with it, and I've always had great results not having to change that taper. But going back on the clip, which was mentioned. To richen the needle, you will say drop that clip down. A lot of needles have at the top where it's inserted in the slide have clips that set that position. Say you drop it down a clip, you're going to be richening the mixture in the needle system area, and raising the clip will lean it again because you're lowering the needle when you're moving the clip up, and when you're moving the clip down, you're raising the needle in that seat. And so that's how you richen, lean, adjust your needle and the needle clip. So play around with that. Hopefully you only have to adjust it once or not at all. You could running fine on just the stock position. And if the needle doesn't have a clip, you can either buy a clip that does have little grooves in it to adjust, or what you can do is shim it with a small washer. I've gone to Fry's Electronics and found the washers that fit. Usually, you would to get that size, just take a needle, go around, start doing some fitment to find out if this washer is going to work for you, and make sure it goes all the way, because it does taper. So make sure it slides all the way. I've even had to bore out some washers to make them work. So. So that about covers the needle as much as we're able to go into it. And again, as we're mentioning, these are the different stages that you are going to be testing this. So say you get out on the bike, test the main jet, make sure that your main jet is set appropriately before you get into adjusting the needle. And once you've covered the main jet and made sure that is set properly or jetted properly, the clip level is set at the right level, then you're going to move to the pilot jet. A basic, what I've always followed and kind of confirms or reassures me on the little jetting guide that we're going to have a link to that we just talked about. Usually when if I step the main jet up 3 times or intervals of 3, I will up the pilot jet 1 step. So say the pilot jet is a 45, I bump the main jet up 3 times, 3 steps. I'm going to up the pilot jet to 47.5.
Because by that point, you would have been out of the adjustment range of the mixture.
And so again, spend some seat time on that and get that adjusted. Pretty much it's safe to do before you just jump on the bike and test out. If you're you kind of have more tolerance with the pilot jet. It's not as finicky, say, as the main jet. And so you have more range because you can pull out of it because the mixture screw or pilot screw, air fuel mixture screw, is in the pilot system, and you can get some more adjustment out of that jet. This is going to be our final stage of tuning, going through what we're going to be talking about, and that is adjusting that screw. That's adjusting the mixture screw or pilot screw, air fuel mixture screw, and so we talked briefly on this last time of positioning, whether it's on the front of the carb or the rear of the carb. What that adjusts. So if the screw is in the rear side of a car, well, the rear is not, in front is not really. Let me start that over.
I don't know what you're getting at.
Okay,
there.
if the screw is towards the head.
What circuit it's adjusting?
Yeah. So if it's closest to, if it's on the side of the motor. On the carb body, what that does is adjust your fuel level or your fuel. And if it's on the intake side...
Well, it adjusts the mixture by metering fuel.
Metering the fuel.
And if it's on the air intake side, then it adjusts the mixture by metering air.
Exactly.
Which, I guess, probably doesn't really matter at the end result, right? I mean, it's not like you do anything differently because of that. Right.
Well, it does adjust. It does matter because it affects. Say if you're which way you adjust. So say if you want to make it leaner, if it's in the front, you back it out.
Yes,
and if it's in the rear, then you screw it in.
That's a good point. I never ever took that into account.
Yeah.
I mean, because I always will just screw with it till I get it right, anyways. So I guess in the end it doesn't matter. But I never thought. That actually makes a lot of sense. And if you know that ahead of time, you can know what way to adjust it. Basically.
Yeah.
You know what... Okay, yeah.
And so, and that's kind of important,
too. That's good to know.
I mean, you can easily get by doing it like Evan does. We didn't really know what he was doing, but we did until it worked.
Yeah, I use the dumbass method
not
and just keep screwing with it until it works correctly.
Yeah. But another where that comes in handy or comes into play, too, is...
that BMW tonight was a perfect example of that.
Is if the motor's a little difficult to start, I'm not sure if we mentioned it in the lean condition, but if the motor is running lean, especially on the pilot system, it will be pretty difficult to start. So if I know every other system, say valves, timing is all good and set, I will richen the adjustment screw or mixture screw and it'll richen the mixture at start, and hopefully it'll get this to be easier to start. So knowing which one you're adjusting is important if, say, you're in that case. So getting to adjusting the mixture screw. Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah, because I don't understand.
Yeah, I kind of wrote notes for me on this.
I don't get why you wrote this the way you did. Okay. Yeah, so go for it.
So what you're going to be doing is, and again, you want to make sure your carbs are synced for this. And every time you make an adjustment, it's kind of a pain in the ass. But like say whenever you're changing out jets, pretty much anytime you pull off the carburetor, carbs from the motor, you're going to want to resync, or at least make sure that you are, if you have a carb synchronizer that plugs in to your vacuum lines, you are going to want to at least check to make sure that they are in sync, because especially in this case, it will have an effect on your tune.
Let me ask a question real quick that might be a really stupid question. I have a vacuum sync tool, and I don't think I've used it once since I bought it.
Carb sync.
Carb sync, yeah. And I always intended to understand it, but I never did.
Is it a dial gauge or is it
it's
mercury?
It's the mercury, basically. It's got blue liquid in it and 4 ports so you can sync the carbs. So you hook those all up to the vacuum ports. Is what you're adjusting the mixture screw?
No.
Okay,
you're adjusting the slides, the needles. You're syncing the carbs.
But how do you do that with the motor running? The point is
there's adjustments on the carbs
from the outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you're doing is adjusting the throttle valve.
Yeah.
So the same thing you would be adjusting on a bench sync.
Yeah.
But okay. I guess I didn't know that there was adjustments on the outside of the carb for that.
Yeah, and you want to.
What does it look like?
They vary.
Yeah,
a lot of times they have the same on the tappet and nut on valves. It's like a nut and tappet.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to look up a picture of that or something.
So essentially, just usually a 10 mil or 8 mil nut, like a lock nut, and then a
flathead screw,
a screw. Or like a stud almost.
It's like a set screw, basically.
Yeah, set screw that has a flat head, or sometimes that stupid specialty fitment thing.
Okay.
Or a square freaking screw. I hate those. So this is again making sure the carbs are synced will affect this. So what you want to do is. Start the bike and get the motor at the running temperature. Get the motor warm, and you're going to set the idle speed slightly higher than what your desired idle speed is going to be. So, say you're going to be running idle speed around, and this of course can be adjusted further. You just want to your first initial set on the screw to be. Or idle screw to be set slightly higher. So say I want to do 1,000 RPM idle speed. I'll set it at say 1,100 or 1,200, and possibly even 13. And so from here, you want to either if you have a gauge, tachometer, watch your tachometer, and what you're going to be doing is, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned you're going to start, or a kind of good base to start your screw at is at 1.5 turns out, and when you're getting this number, you want to seat completely the screw until it just snugs. You don't want to over tighten this. These are very easily. You can very easily break these and screw them up
because they're tapered to a point.
Yeah,
and so if you jam them in there, it's going to mess up that taper.
Exactly, and I've experienced it a few times. I know
I've done it.
You've done it and seen it. I've done it as well. Is when you tighten that down too much, there's a good chance you can break off just the tip of that taper on that screw, and then it's going to be lodged in there. So any adjustment you make. Nothing's going to happen.
Plus, you destroy the little O-ring that's in there too when you crush it like that.
So be cautious of that, and it's another thing you want to check too, is see if someone haven't done this already. So if you're trying to make some adjustments but nothing's changing, make sure and check that. So start out at 1.5 turns out. That's usually where like stock setting is to begin with, and set and then so when you're making your adjustments left or right. And it doesn't quite matter if you're riching or leaning it. You want to just make your adjustments left or right, turning it in quarter to half turns at a time. So say you have a twin with 2 carburetors, or 4-cylinder with 4 separate carburetors. You're going to want to make each adjustment to each one, check the reading, and what you're looking for is you're looking for the RPM to increase. So if the RPM is increasing, you're headed in the right direction. And just keep making those slight adjustments to each one, and you're watching that RPM gauge or that RPM level to rise or decrease. And once, say it rises and then it starts to decrease, go back to where it was at the highest setting or the highest RPM speed, and leave them there.
So at some point you'll get to you'll see. I've never done it this way, but this is awesome because I never knew how to do it. I always just jack around.
Yeah, I mean there are a couple ways of doing it as well.
It'll get to a point where the RPM will increase and then decrease if you keep going in the same direction.
Yeah, it's kind of
or if you're going, like, say you're backing it out and backing it out is richening it, you'll get to a point where nothing happens anymore, in which you'll want to go back.
Got it.
But
okay, cool.
Yeah, and I'll probably after I go through this, there's a few different like tricks for like a twin carburetors or for a twin to set it very easily. What was it? Yeah, so keep making those adjustments until you've reached the max RPM or the highest RPM position of those screws. And now back the idle screw or idle adjustment back down to, or idle screw back down to, say, that 1,000 RPM that I want to be at. And now repeat this step one more time. I usually do like smaller increments, like maybe quarter turns at a time. And what you're doing is just kind of
eighth to a quarter.
Thank you. Dropping it down, and again watching those RPMs. The reason I first start doing it at a higher RPM because it's much easier to see that RPM rise or drop. And now when you're going back to kind of your RPM level that you want it set at, it's kind of just more so very fine-tuning that previous benchmark that you made just prior.
Okay, so say you're doing this on a CB550 with 4 carburetors, okay? So you need to go through and make this. Okay, so say you did the first step, you set the RPM a little bit higher than what you want, and then you go through and you start doing each one quarter turn at a time, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, do you measure the... Okay, so we're looking for the RPM to rise and like hit its peak. Do you go through and you do the turn on each carburetor? So you do all 4 and then look at the RPM. And then you do all 4 again. Because, like, wouldn't you start to notice a difference, like, after you did the first carb or the second carb?
Yeah, definitely. You know? I mean, you can easily do each one. I just like to be at the same spot on every one at the same time kind of thing. But I guess what you're saying is you can kind of get an idea which direction to go.
And then,
because wouldn't you start to see, if that was going to make a difference, wouldn't you start to see a change in RPM even as you just did the first carb? Or maybe by the second carb?
Yeah.
I guess definitely. I don't really know what I'm asking.
I mean, you can do it that way, but what I've found is you have to kind of go back and even fine-tune that a little bit more.
Right.
But if you just kind of just go through it, there's no keeping track of like which one or adjustment to make.
Is it okay on a set of 4 carbs to have the mixture screws different on them? Or do you want to
You
have...
usually want them pretty much in the same spot.
I mean, that's all dependent on how... I mean, if it is... Oh, boy.
I've tried not to laugh. I hope that got picked up.
But if you do have them all at different settings, and they're, say that mixture level is perfect on each one, you got to think back, is like, okay, why is it doing that? These are all the same parts, all the same jets.
Right.
What is causing that to each carb, or even just one, to have a different mixture or sets or mixture screw position?
Well, couldn't it come down to, on like a 4-cylinder bike, that the inner cylinders are at a different temperature than the outer ones? Wouldn't that affect it?
Yeah, I mean that could easily be it.
But
which on the I mean, because say even on like when I tune like triples, like on this XS 750, I'll run the middle cylinder a little slightly richer, because they do have tendencies to overheat and and fry that middle cylinder. So I guess you can do it that way, and that will be okay. But it's more thought for concern for me, at least.
I guess it'd be a lot more confusing if you tried to do them all separately.
Yeah.
Unless you're really good at keeping track at where you've turned it, like, you know, because I find often that I'll start on one and I'll get it good, and then I'll be like, shit, was that 3 turns or 4 turns as I'm doing the next one? So then I'll have to go back, count the turns in, and then back it out to that point, and then go and do the rest of them.
Yeah, and you're also dealing with slight adjustments. Like, say a half turn isn't going to make a lot of difference. And really doing each carb, you're going to have to either have a really... it could even change... it won't even change enough to slightly move the analog tachometer. Right. And you mostly have to do that by ear and feel.
Right.
And so syncing them all at the same position, it'll increase that amount of rise. So that's another reason. I've never really thought about that before in the past, but that's just how I've done it. And that's another reason that could possibly be a easier way to adjust this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Shoot, what was I going at now? So once you've gone through this step, the second time around, then if the idle has increased again, or hopefully it increased a little bit, because that just means you fine-tuned it just that much more, back down to, say, your 1,000 RPM, if that's what I just threw that number out there to begin with, so back to your desired idle speed. And another like kind of PSs here on
PS
on your mixture screw adjustment. If say there's a point where you're kind of in the ballpark of your maximum RPM range, and like it's in between like 1.5 or 2 turns, and they don't really make too much of a difference. You can't even tell a difference. There may not even be one. I will back it down to whatever position, say, is richer. If your mixture screw is on the intake side, I will back it in, or I'll screw it back into the 1.5 turns out, and if it's on the side of the motor, then I'll back it out to the 2 turns out point. So if you do come across that, or if that does happen,
are you saying
set it to the richer setting? It'll help with
are you saying
kind of acceleration of
are you
throttle.
Saying like if you don't notice a difference between 1.5 and 2 turns out,
yeah, exactly,
set it to whichever one makes it richer?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And and then also another pretty important thing too is if you're in your when you're adjusting the mixture screw, and if you've kind of run out of adjustment, so say if you're all the way seated with the mixture screw trying to pull out more adjustment, you need to replace or swap out your pilot jet according. So say you're screwing it in, and that's if it's on the intake side again, and it's screwed all the way in, that means that your pilot jet is too small. And so you want to do the next step up will cure that if you're within range, and or possibly may even need two, but that just tells you that your pilot jet is too lean and too small. And if it's on the motor side, manifold side, and you're all the way seated in, then you need to
go bigger,
go smaller.
No.
And you're running too rich of a pilot,
right?
And so you need to run a smaller jet so you can kind of pull more range
that is
out.
really good to know. I always assumed, like, I never knew that it makes sense, but I never knew that mattered. So I would always just assume, like, if you hit the end of the adjustment range, like,
you're done.
You would go up. No. I knew that you would then change the pilot, but I never realized that they worked depending on the location that they adjusted fuel or air. I just never even thought about it. So I would always think that, like, I always assumed they adjusted fuel, really. So if you hit the, screwed all the way in, and let's just say it was all the way in, and then you had fully leaned it, you needed to go down a size. I didn't realize that it would. Anyways, you know what I mean. That's good to know.
Also, another thing, kind of same category. If you have the air fuel, or if you have the mixture screw out more than say anywhere from like I'd say 3.5 turns out. Once again, I would swap pilot jets according to whether or not it's on the front intake side or the manifold side. Reason for this,
they'll fall out.
I've
had that happen before.
Yeah, because
I think 3 is
I would say
safe.
3. I actually had 3 originally on here, and I modified to 3 or 3.5.
Because 4 is probably completely falling out. Anywhere over 3, and you're in the range that vibration will cause it to back out.
And reason being is that's what the importance of that spring that is around this screw. That spring is keeping that adjustment screw in place. It's keeping tension on it so it doesn't vibrate out. And so when you have it backed out that far, that tension is gone, and that spring is just floating in there.
And it'll cause interesting problems.
Yeah.
And then you'll be very surprised when you go to troubleshoot it and notice that the screw is gone.
I think I was going to mention the little trick for twins.
Yeah, do that.
So like say on twins that have the dual carbs, a carb for each cylinder, a way that I have done this that has been a lot easier to kind of because some of those linkages are funny, and to where they're not really, they're more like idle adjustments. No, never mind. I'm sorry. I'll just go back to what I was originally saying. I'll start the bike and have the RPMs with the idle screw kind of boosted up substantially, and or not substantially, but higher, and pull the plug to the opposite side or just pull the spark plug wire or cap off of the spark plug, so that now that cylinder is no longer firing, and then so you're running on one cylinder. And then you can really go in and fine tune that one cylinder to get that perfect setting on that side. And then again, you're just judging it by the increase in idle speed or RPM speed. And then once that one's set at its highest point, I will then plug in the other cylinder and unplug the cylinder I just previously did and do the exact same thing. And when you're done, kind of similar to what you were saying about doing each individual one, more than likely they'll be within the ballpark, but they could be completely different as well.
That's how I did them on the BMW.
Yeah.
And what could make them different is, say you have like high pipes or custom pipes or scrambler pipes or something, and the pipes might be different lengths, and that might be why your adjustment screw might be different.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's another way. I love when, like, say I'm tuning a Harley or something because they're single cylinders. A very easy way to do this, which is kind of similar. It's pretty much the same theory. You're trying to achieve. I'm sorry, not
single carb.
Single carburetor. I'm sorry.
What Harley are you talking about?
I knew you were talking. He's talking about a very poor running
Sportster. Is to do adjustment on this. I will start the bike. Again, it's very important on all of on this step too to keep the motor at normal operating temperature. And if I'm spending a lot of time on it, make sure there's at least a fan. If it's an air-cooled motor, a fan running on that motor. To keep it as far as simulating air flowing through the fins of the motor to help that keep it
a little cooled down,
normal operating temperature. Because again, if you're running too hot, the settings you're making right now are going to be different because of the density of air when it's hot versus it's cold, and it's not good for the motor to begin with. On back to like setting a single carbureted motor, when you're adjusting this, I usually go the complete one extreme to the other. So I'm finding, say I'm leaning it out until you can really hear the motor starting to stumble on itself. And then so I'll mark that as my point there, and then I'll go to the other direction to richen it. And as I'm doing this, from when it started to stumble, I'm counting the turns that I'm doing until I reach the point of the other extreme of where it starts to fumble and stumble on itself because it's too rich. And so say that it took me 5 turns to reach from one extreme of lean to the other extreme of too rich, and then I'll just split that in half, and then from the stumbling on itself too rich, I'll then back that back out 2.5 turns to get the dead center of the two extremes, and that's going to be your perfect mixture level right there. So that's a really quick, easy way to do it.
That makes sense. That's how I've always done it on cars. On my Mustang.
Yeah,
that's always how
exactly.
I do it.
Yeah,
that works.
So, I hope we were in depth enough for you to kind of understand and still be able to follow us. Carb tuning definitely has a very bad rap as far as being very scary and intimidating. Like most things, I'm sure if you're your first time working on a bike and you're listening, and
if you got through cleaning it, then you can tune it. I think this is. I mean, I learned a lot just listening to you talk about it. This is good if you break it down into steps like this and you do them one by one. It's it's a lot easier to handle. Yeah,
Jared will definitely voice on this as well, especially when you are tuning carbs. If it's not running properly or not really running well, if you're going to make an adjustment or you're going to swap out a jet, do one at a time. So if you're don't swap out, okay, I'm going to swap the main jet, try this jet out, and then swap out this pilot jet too and try this out. Because you could have made the fix,
but you don't know what fixed it.
Yeah, and you don't know what fixed it, or you wouldn't even notice that it was fixed.
You could have just made more problems for yourself.
Yeah,
and then you don't know what to change back.
Exactly. So do one thing at a time, especially with carb tuning, and stick with it. I mean, hopefully this can help you out to eliminate a lot of the frustrations, but especially first few times out, I know even just spending hours and hours and days researching and trying to better educate myself on tuning and how they work and what to do, it still is very frustrating. So hopefully this puts you in a better start than where we were when we first started doing it. So
yeah, cool. Well, let us know what you think. We had a couple emails, but I don't think we need to read them because they were just specific questions to you guys about bikes that you built. So
I guess that means I have to email.
So get on your email and write them back.
I was hoping just to blast it out and just be done with it.
No, you actually need to answer that.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, so check out the website, motorbikemondays.com.
Yeah, and we'll have definitely a link to the jetting recommendations.
I'll definitely put up this info.
That was by Denny Zander, whoever you may be.
Thank you.
He is definitely
nice work.
Definitely saved my ass a couple times. So
we'll be back next week.
Later.
Yeah.